about veto legislation? What counterbalancing power does Congress have there?
They can come back and redo it.
Well, just what I told you. They can override the veto, right? Just told you that Congress overrode Nixon's veto. It's rare for Congress to override vetoes because it requires a two-thirds majority in both chambers, but it's still possible in the Constitution. I'm very careful about word choice on these next two items. I try to be most of the time, but these next two items really reinforces that. I've indicated the President has the power to nominate cabinet officers and judges and ambassadors and so on. It's, a lot of times we say the President has the power to appoint judges and ambassadors and so on. But it's really a joint power, isn't it?
It has to be approved by Congress.
It has to be ratified. The appointments have to be confirmed by the Senate. And the idea, you hear this sometimes in the political debate about like when the President nominates a Supreme Court justice or something like that, and people will say, why doesn't the Senate just approve the President's nominees? I mean, he has that authority under the Constitution to pick whoever he wants. I think that's contrary to the Constitution. I don't think the Constitution contemplates that the Senate's just going to roll over and play dead and approve whoever the President sends up, right? Their duty is to review the appointments and confirm those that they think merit confirmation and not confirm those that don't. So it's a joint power. The President nominates and the Senate confirms. That's the appointment power. And then the same thing with the treaty power. The Constitution says he shall have the power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, provided two-thirds of the senators present concur to make treaties. So the President's treaty-making power is not unilateral. It's a power that's shared with the Senate. And there have been some very notable examples in our history of the Senate failing to confirm treaties that have been negotiated by the President. How about the treaty that created the League of Nations? Remember learning about that in your American history class?
No.
By the way, whose idea, the predecessor to the United Nations, like the first, whose idea was the League of Nations? Woodrow Wilson, the American president, right? The United States never joined the League of Nations. His own creation, the League of Nations, the United States never joined that, and they didn't join. The United States didn't join because the Senate failed to confirm the treaty or ratify the treaty. There's a great example, but there's other examples. So for people who say that the Senate, the Constitution says the President has the power to make treaties, and the Senate ought to just ratify the treaties. I think that's not consistent with what the framers of the Constitution had in mind. Okay, so the bottom line is that most of the constitutional powers of the President are shared. So it's a short list to begin with. They were contemplating a weak executive because they didn't delegate a lot to the President, and what they did delegate to the President is shared with Congress. At least in terms of that last part, talking about the constitutional basis of presidential authority, I guess the overarching point that I was trying to make was that Americans today assume that the institution of the presidency has certain powers that are inherent in the institution itself, that are inherent in the office of the president. And part of that is the result of the way that the media covers the presidency. As we said, this notion of the media presidency. I also said that academics who write about the president, about the presidency, tend to associate certain roles and powers and responsibilities with the institution. But the sort of cumulative effect of that is it leaves people with the impression that the institution is empowered to do certain things. So that all we really have to do is find the right person to serve in the office, and the institution is sufficiently empowered to be able to address any number of problems that we might confront.